Hello and welcome to We Had Movies, and I'm your host Mo Yegi, and
Eric, once again.
there, yeah, back again. And also this time we have a surprise guest in our crew. I'd like to introduce my partner, also known as Iris Novak.
Hello. Thank you for
Yay,
And
having
Iris.
me.
yeah, well, I'm so happy to have
Exciting.
you here. Excited to have you in this specific topic, and the reason why we invited her today is because we're going to be talking about Spice World, the movie, and if anybody knows a lot about that movie, it's definitely Iris, and so she'll have a lot to say. She's definitely going to be introducing the movie to everyone as well because she has a very good understanding of it. So we'll have her do the summary and then we'll get into some exploration of the film, of course, as we normally do. She's also going to be introducing a new segment for us, so that'll be a surprise for everyone. So keep your ears open, and yeah. So, Iris, would you like to give a little background about yourself, or you just want to get into the movie?
Yeah, why not?
Okay.
So, hi.
Well,
I'm a Spice Girls scholar. I've been obsessed with the Spice Girls since I was 9 when I heard their very first album for the first time. It was life-changing. They were like my Madonna for people who grew up in the 80s. And yeah, that was like my first introduction to music. So, they were very important to me when I was young. And I've continued to follow them. Like they've just for a band that was only like a really big deal for like 2 years, they've still like their legacy is lasting. And so they've always been sort of a part of my life. I like all things 90s, as you both know.
yeah.
And the Spice Girls are a big part of that. And I was remembering that Mo and I were watching that season of The Circle when Mel B and Emma were catfishes. I don't know if
Oh
you've
yeah.
seen The Circle, Eric.
I do remember that season.
Yeah, and there was a contestant on that season who claimed to be a Spice Girls super fan. And when they did the Spice Girls quiz on the show, she got answers wrong. And I was
Mm,
livid. I was so mad. Like, how can you call yourself a Spice Girls
a
super
super
fan and
fan, right?
you don't know which Spice Girl patted Prince Charles on the bum? Like, it was offensive. Um, but anyways, so watching this movie again, it's been a while since I've seen it, so it was a cool experience. And I just have like a one sentence summary, which is that various fame hungry men attempt to control and profit off of five intrepid young British women entertainers, and also aliens are real? Question mark. And it's
Wow.
really
Okay.
hard to like otherwise summarize this movie because like the whole thing just feels like a bunch of sketches, like sketch comedy in a way. Like there's just all this bizarre stuff going on, and the Spice Girls just happen to be in the center of it. So it's kind of hard to like give a plot summary of it because it feels like there's six different plots going on.
Let's say that the
So
big underlying plot though is that concert that they're gonna have, the big concert that they're all practicing for, right?
yeah, true. So the Spice Girls haven't performed live yet in this movie, and they're preparing for their first live show, and hijinks ensue. They have this manager who's very controlling, but also cares about them quite a bit, and they're everyone is governed by this like Svengali manager in the background, who's played by one of the James Bonds. His name
So
escapes
Roger
me
Moore.
now. Roger Moore, which I thought was really funny. Um,
I did
with
too.
his
I thought he had a whole Bond villain vibe to him, so I thought it was a nice flip that they did for his character.
Yeah, they
yeah,
kind of gave him that corporate leader sort of nonsense, but he did also pet a rabbit at some point, and then it
And a
changed to
cat
a
and a
cat.
rabbit.
Yeah, I'm not sure what happened there. Like, I think that was a part of the comedy, is just that like every time he's petting a different animal. Um, what I
and
thought also was interesting about this, like using Roger Moore and the whole thing was, very uh seeing how he was like the James Bond notoriously for the longest time, right, as James
Mhm.
Bond. So I guess using Roger Moore was perfect for that because Pierce Brosnan would have been too soon. You'd have had not very many options. I guess Sean Connery, but nah, it wouldn't have been funny, right? Like that's the thing with Roger Moore. You get a little bit of more humor out of him. It was much more interesting that way, and he was very silly, and yeah, I like that. But yeah, go ahead.
It's also like interesting that this band was only, again, like they'd only been like a big deal for 2 years, but they had the management behind them. Like this was a rumor for the Spice Girls that there was, a man behind the scenes kind of, puppeteering them, which wasn't really the case.
Mhm.
Um, like they definitely did quite a bit on their own before they signed with Simon Fuller. So that idea that they brought in this like, guy in the background who just kind of speaks nonsense but runs the show was
Mhm.
kind of funny, but also that they got Roger Moore.
Yeah, and you have to wonder if maybe he is a fan of the Spice Girls in real life, or was, at the time. And I mean, a lot of British people probably took a lot of pride and how big Spice Girls really were
Yeah, well,
internationally.
they
So,
cracked America, right? Like so few
mhm,
British bands, let alone girl bands, were able to do that. So,
yeah.
um, yeah, so that's like one sort of plot is just like their relationship with their management, which we can get
Mhm.
into later with some of the other thoughts I had about that. And then, of course, there's Alan Cumming as this man doing a documentary about the Spice Girls and taking himself real serious as he tries to like capture all these intense moments that the girls are going through.
In a very
Um,
natural.
he was funny, and as a kid, I didn't know who Alan Cumming was. So, watching it now, knowing who he is, I was like, wow, he was in this movie. Like that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
I definitely had that same feeling watching the movie and seeing a lot of familiar faces that I am more familiar with now as an adult versus as a child. I was
Hmm.
just left thinking, okay, who's this guy? Who's this guy? Really focus. My focus was on the Spice Girls, and yeah, there's a couple of other familiar faces, but now as an adult, I see all of um these actors, these prominent people that were featured in this movie. And again,
Mhm.
I think it speaks to who the Spice Girls were at the time. Um,
Hmm.
they were this enormous phenomenon, like big as the Beatles type of thing, you know.
Yeah.
Seeing the Spice Girls hit North America was kind of like the British invasion of the '60s with
Hmm.
like the Beatles and all of those bands that came from the UK in that time. It very much felt like our own version of that.
Like our
Um,
generations, like, yeah,
exactly,
Beatles basically. Yeah, I
exactly,
definitely
because
feel that way too. Like Spice Girls is like our generation's Beatles, and that's why it has more than just what their songs are about. It's more than just girl
we
power
had a
and all
there was a
that, but it
lot of
really
music coming out
represented
of the UK back
90s.
then.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and it
for sure.
really represented like 90s in a very like big way, right? Like and like if I was to sum up the 90s, I would have to include Spice Girls, right? Like that there's no way you
Absolutely.
can get out of that. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And I feel like just sort of, going to the feeling of watching it as a kid, like I was so obsessed with the band. And so for me, it was just like watching these girls that I idolized on TV or sorry, on the movie screen, which was really cool. But as watching it, I was thinking about how, my sister's generation, which kids growing up in the 80s, they had their, like Madonna was the big pop icon, right? And Madonna was just Madonna, right? And then my generation, it was
Hmm.
very much, Spice Girls and groups like girl groups, boy groups. And I just wonder how much of that influenced my personality as someone who like prefers to collaborate versus being the person in the spotlight or the person sort of driving the ship, so to speak, or driving the car, so to speak. I just felt like watching the movie, it was a really good representation of five women who are friends as well as like
Business
coworkers, I
partners.
guess.
Yeah, yeah.
And I thought it was portrayed like in a really authentic way watching it, just kind of like you can really feel that they like each other and they're teasing each other and like that they're going through this crazy adventure together and they're so young. It's just
So,
that was another
yeah.
thing Mo and I were talking about when we were watching it. I was like, how old do you think Emma was? Like Baby
Right.
Spice in while filming, and she was only 20.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
just crazy to think
Like
about.
we look at them now, and even watching the movie now, yeah, so I just wanted to make sure it was you could hear me there. Yeah,
Yep.
so just and the same issue we were talking about is like, yeah, you're watching this film, you see that these younger women, but you just imagine them being a lot older, or like more
Mm-hmm.
like, because they're so professional, so and
Mhm.
like so put together, I guess, is like, as far as like knowing and having confidence in yourself, they very much portray like a huge amount of confidence for somebody who you would say like is from a suburb of some
A
sort,
working class
working
background.
class, yeah, family. So
Posh Spice
yeah.
excluded.
Of course. So yeah, and just looking at that background and just like how young these women were, it's really really motivating to see um how much courage and how much like strength they had, really, to do something like that. And what the other thing I noticed when we were talking about that their age is also the fact that it's not that they were amazingly talented singers, right? They just seemed to have together brought like this really amazing presence. Like they were all good, they were all talented, but nothing compared to like the talent you'll see now, right? And singing and people, the way that people put effort in the choreography and the dancing, it's insane now, right? Like it's just gone to the whole other level. But for
Yep.
them to do that with very little competition, but also to just be just good good enough, but also be able to push this like new kind of brand out there that no
Yeah.
one, you know what I mean, to no
It
one
was
really
about
thought
more
of.
than the music. It was about more than a band. It was about like, I know it's like cheesy, but Jerry says it all the time, but it was about girl power. It was about, women
Mhm.
uniting
Mhm.
and being able to accomplish something together, which again, it sounds so corny, but like it's legit. Like and it hasn't really been replicated since.
No.
Um,
No.
in the same way, which I think is really interesting. But okay, so I'm glad you both feel passionately about this because I've done some analysis of both of you
Okay.
as to which
Okay,
Spice
so
Girl
we've come to the
you
end of the
are.
summary, I guess, of the film. But before
Yeah.
you, well, let me just finish up with my kind of little adds to the summary of the film. So,
Okay.
we did have like an idea of like, okay, so the film is about a journey of women. Obviously, it's specifically about the Spice Girls and their journey. The other interesting thing was it's basically the story is being written as the film is going on, so it's kind of breaking the
Hmm.
fourth wall the whole time, and I really like that. And it really does fall into another thing that's very British about it, is the humor, like the comedy, the sketches, the type of comedians that they use. The comedians specifically were British, except for one Canadian actor, Mark
Mark
McKinney.
McKinney.
Yeah, who was the
Mhm.
director, who was basically the guy who was writing the movie as we were watching it, right? Kind of, more or
Hmm.
less. And you get that idea from the ending more at the end. But yeah, like after at the end you realize, oh, he's been writing this story the whole time, and this film was just a film about the film being made, basically, which is really
And it
interesting.
was so funny. Like, and I know we
Mm-hmm.
mentioned this a little bit earlier, but like not knowing who the actors were as a kid, I remember it being really funny as a kid. And
Mm-hmm.
then watching it now, I'm like, it was very funny.
It was very
Everything about.
funny. It was very well structured. It just, like, as a film altogether, it's so well put together that it's worth rewatching, and it has lots of
It
value,
holds up.
and it holds up, and almost like you don't even need to know who the Spice Girls were to understand that
No.
the story was had value, and it had some humor, and the songs were also well timed. Like, I liked how another thing that you would want to point out about the summarizing this film is that they did do a good job of promoting the Spice Girls by letting them sing
Hmm.
some of their biggest hits, and also making them fit with the storyline, more or less,
Well,
right?
they were actually writing that album while they filmed the movie.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. So that's even
Yeah,
more interesting. Yeah.
which is a bit bananas to think about.
Yeah.
um,
So yeah,
yeah.
it's a very well put together film altogether, I thought. And But yeah, just for like summarizing it, yeah, there's so many ways you can explore this film, but I really do, my favorite thing about it is the British humor and just like all the little tie-ins to the
Hmm.
different comedians and the different things about the media and the world going on at that time, especially. And then another big journey,
The
another little
paparazzi.
the sub story, right? The paparazzi, the tabloids. The tabloids are like
Hmm.
the big enemy as well. And then they kind of introduced that at the end, where it's like we can also be friends with the tabloids. It's like we just want everybody to be happy, you know.
It's
um,
very
yeah,
relevant
yeah.
plot line to today.
Yeah. But yeah, so that being said, I mean, unless Eric, did you want to add any other little tidbits about just
No,
like
I
the
think you pretty
summary?
much covered it.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, what we'll do is we'll move into, I guess, the little new
Oh,
segment
sorry.
that Iris.
Before we jump in, I guess we did kind of forget about the pregnant friend.
Oh, right.
Oh,
Well,
right.
there
There's
is the
another
sub
subplot.
story. Yeah, the subplot of the pregnant friend. Now that is interesting because I don't know what they were getting into with that either. Like, was that like in your
It didn't
opinion?
really feel like necessary.
Mhm.
But I appreciate that it was like showing that the girls had one foot in real life and one foot in, the celebrity world. So they had to have
Yeah.
a character to kind of ground them.
Ground them,
But
exactly.
I don't think it was like executed very well. But I
I
have
think they
some
were
more comments
trying to
about that
also
later.
kind of, yeah, I think they were trying to indicate some like with that storyline, just as like as a part of being a, the bigger picture. I think that part of it was them also kind of, again, going back to the girl power thing, but just because you're about girl power doesn't mean that you're against necessarily having children,
And having a family,
having a
yeah.
family and all this thing.
I
So
felt that
I
they were
think,
trying to hammer that home as well.
yeah, so I think that's why they added the pregnant girl, because it's like, no, we're still looking to do that stuff. We're not saying just, girls only, but we also, you know, we want to empower women right now. So it's like if we're going to
Hmm.
talk about the whole thing about, having a family, raising a child, let's just stick to focusing on our pregnant friend. We don't need to have her have a husband or somebody else in the scene.
Yeah.
It doesn't need to be that. It could just be about the women and their story. Yeah.
Hmm.
So I think there was some good underlying plots there as well, which was really interesting. And then they even got as far as to actually give birth to the child
Which
in
was hilarious.
in
So
the film.
funny.
Yeah, and so they definitely did a little another journey that closed at the end. And of course, I mean, you can't summarize the film without talking about the bomb, because at the end they all go, "Oh no, what about the bomb?" And then that
What
blows up the
about the bomb?
bus. So there's a bomb at the end, even though that kind of got added in randomly in the story halfway
It
through.
kind of feels like
Just leave
it's
it
just
as
another thing that
clickbait. Like this movie has a bomb in it, and you're just gonna have to watch it to find out what happens.
exactly.
Like,
Does it explode? Does it not explode? You're gonna
yeah,
have to
we're not
watch
gonna
and
tell
find out,
you. No spoilers.
right?
Uh,
Yeah. But yeah, okay. So you were saying that you had like a new segment for us. So what's this new
yeah,
segment?
it's which Spice Girl are you? And
Okay.
obviously, it's only gonna be for this episode, but we're gonna introduce it anyways.
Okay.
And I just watching this, I felt you both in this movie, um, in a really big way. Like Eric, I felt like you are Mel C energy, your Sporty Spice energy. She's loyal. She has like a quieter personality, but she likes what she likes, and she's not threatened by other people. And I just felt like that was very Eric to me.
Yeah,
I
I
don't
would
know if
agree with
you
you.
do
That's a
you
great
do
description.
you feel
Yeah,
that connection? I also feel
totally,
like you have a
absolutely.
little bit of posh, like you have this posh energy where you're kind of over it. You're not here for the child contest winners. You just want to put on your eye mask and go to bed, like that kind of energy.
Yeah, and I
Oh
mean,
my
I've
God, I
seen
love
his
it.
Versace dresses too, so he
Yeah,
does have a
Absolutely,
few of
right?
those. Yeah.
he slays a little black dress.
Which black dress looks the best on me, Mo?
Yeah,
Oh yeah, the Versace dress, the Versace black dress. Yeah.
and I also feel like like Victoria in this movie was so like that was her introduction to the world in a big way in terms of her personality and how funny she is. And I feel like that's Eric as well, where like you get to know him
Mhm.
and you're like, oh my God, he's hilarious. Like,
Yes, yeah, that's a good one.
he doesn't always like
She is,
come to the event being the funny one, but then out of nowhere you're crying and you realize it's because of something Eric said, you know?
yeah, that brings up a good point. Like, yes, like Victoria to me was like the surprise comedic character in the whole film. Like, I didn't realize that she was the funniest of the Spice Girls till rewatching it recently. But it
Like
seems
they're
like
all funny, but she was
apparently
just
she's
like,
always been funny. Yeah, and I just
Yeah.
didn't
mhm.
really know much about her. So yeah, it's really interesting to watch it. And then she even makes a joke about her boyfriend Beckham at the time,
Yeah.
who becomes her husband, of
6 foot,
course.
green eyes, pair of loafers, and no socks. Um,
Exactly.
and then Mo, I feel like you have that Mel B anarchist energy where
Mhm.
you like, we're living in a simulation and the rules are all made up. And like, you're very funny in terms of your observation. Like, you're not trying to be funny. You just have a funny way of just being. And then another part of you, I feel, is Ginger Spice, where like as much as you know that we're in the simulation, you understand that there are rules and we're supposed to be following them. Like I feel when we were watching the scene where Jerry and Mel B are playing chess, I felt like I was in your mind. Like I feel like that is like one of the battles that you have in your mind, where like you're a rebel, but then also you're like, I'm afraid.
Oh, that's a good summary. Yeah, I guess I'm two Spice Girls in one. So yeah.
Yeah, well, you both are, and I don't know. That's just how I felt watching it. I was like, that really like there's just certain like there's Mel B energy where she's just like big energy, and I feel like that is you for sure. And then there's Jerry where she's a little more, she's very warm, but she's a little less loud and more like I don't know, hesitant,
I
a little
guess
more
like if you were to
professional.
use, yeah, like you should make like a spectrum and then have like
Yeah,
each
like
one
the
of the
big
Spice
five
Girls on a
personalities. Yes,
corner, and then we all
yes,
kind of fall in between these two, you know
yes.
what I mean, these
Where
Spice
do you
Which
Girls.
fall
Spice
on the
Girl are
spice
you?
spectrum?
Yeah,
There you go.
I oh man, I love that. But
yeah,
do you feel like I captured you both?
I think
I think so,
so.
yeah.
Yeah, I think you
Okay,
touched on a
good.
lot of important things. Yeah, like I do like to break the rules, but I understand that you have to follow them. So yeah, that kind
Yeah.
of gave me that sense of, yeah, like I could see myself, and I could see myself liking Jerry a lot too when I was younger. I definitely liked her a lot. I mean, aside from the fact that she had big boobs and and I was young, I think that Jerry attracted me in the sense that she was very just like, I don't give a shit, let's just do this, like
The
that
no
kind of
nonsense
no
attitude,
no
yeah.
nonsense attitude. Yeah.
And it's
So
interesting that Jerry Halliwell now is like so conservative, but at
mhm.
the time, like she would take all these risks, but she did them in a way that was really palatable. And then for whatever reason, like Mel B got the Scary Spice label. Well, I mean, part of that is also because she was the black member of the band, I'm sure. Um, and that's, the white member is a little more palatable than the black member. Like that's just the reality of, the pop industry at
Yeah.
that time and now. But
I
yeah,
mean, no
like it
matter
just,
what you look at, you're always going to have to talk about differences between people. And like, I mean, at the end
mm-hmm.
of the day, that's always going to be a subject. And, the
But I
fact
think the
that,
combination of them was so important. Like
right.
they really riffed off each other in a way that was like almost magical to watch. Like they just
Yeah.
felt like they were the powerhouses of the band in a way,
Mhm.
without necessarily being the strongest singer or necessarily the prettiest or the cutest or whatever. That just like the power of the two of them was really cool to watch,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that's why I love you. So.
Of course. And I mean, yeah, just just the intensity of like the how their friendship and how much that's invested in how their group stands the test of time. Now, to me, I know that eventually all bands have to break up. Eventually, everybody has to go their own direction. Like, there's no way you can last forever. I mean, or not, maybe not break up, but you're going to eventually want to do different
Different
projects,
things.
right? Yeah. So you
Yep.
might not end up doing it with together. but it would be nice, like, if the Spice Girls or something like that could ever exist again. But I feel like there's so much pressure now to be so much better at all these things, like to be
Hmm.
musically inclined, to be attractive to the masses, to be, that it's just almost like you can never recreate what the Spice Girls is or was.
There is
Like it,
an innocence about the Spice Girls in
yeah,
a lot of ways, I feel, where it
yeah.
just kind of felt like five random girls, like they weren't necessarily, trained. I know some of them did dance training, but not really. Like it's like not to the
And
extent
none
of
of
what
them
you
have
see
a history
now.
of coming from like a show where they were selected, right? They were
No.
before that.
Yeah.
They were before, anybody really knew how to select a band, how to
Yeah.
make something like that in house. Where now it's like, you could go to Korea and they have K-pop bands just coming out of the
Of a
woodwork,
factory.
right? Yeah. Like, let's just make
Yeah.
the
Exactly.
next band. Where it just, you could never do that at the time because they just didn't, no one was trying to do that. So I feel like,
Yeah.
if anything, Spice Girls also probably created K-pop. So let's be like, it's like
Well,
a
definitely
loud
influence.
influenced,
Yeah.
yeah, that
There's no question it
Hmm.
revolution.
influenced it. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it'd be nice to see something like that happen again. But I feel like that's it. We've experienced the evolution of pop to the point where now it's got to be something different. It's got to be
Well,
something.
and like
Yeah,
Little Mix came close, but they never cracked America, right? So
yeah,
that's
yeah.
that's always the goal with Britpop, is that you want to be able to crack America, and it's really hard to do if you don't do it a certain way at a certain time, or you don't have the right people backing
Hmm.
you. So yeah, that's a story for another day. But
Yeah.
I want to talk about like one of the themes that kept coming up for me,
Hmm.
in terms of like what I wouldn't have picked up on as a kid, was the voyeurism, like the feeling of the girls in kind of a fishbowl and being products and not people. And I thought it was kind of funny when they're on the bus and you see Mel B analyzing the fish in her aquarium. I don't know if that was like an intentional nod to that theme that was kind of throughout the movie, but um, I
I think it
noticed that a lot more watching it now.
absolutely. I
And
think it absolutely was. I think
yeah,
the movie, especially now, I definitely picked up on all of the satirical elements that they included, like the mockery of celebrity culture, media
yeah,
sensationalism, music, the exploitation of people in the music industry.
yes, yes,
Um, even going back to what you said about what most said about girl power and stuff, like even the commodification of girl
hmm,
power, almost as selling girl power as a product as opposed to an ideal. um they explored all of these topics in such a subtle way. It was actually perfectly done, in my opinion, because you don't really get a sense of the movie being a satire until
no,
you put it all together and you look under that lens. Um,
yeah. And I think
I would
you're,
go ahead.
oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, when I was a kid, I really didn't give it a second thought. I just kind of, enjoyed a movie about the Spice Girls. But now seeing it as an adult, I very much picked up on all of these elements, and I thought it was fantastically done.
Hmm.
Yeah, and I feel like you're jumping right into something I had written down when I was watching. I wrote down two things, which one was these men who think they know everything and who hold all the power actually have no power without these girls. And that's kind of
Exactly.
played out when Clifford is waiting for them to show up for the concert. And it's like he's literally going to hang himself um, because without them, he doesn't have a livelihood. And the same thing with the tabloids. Without them, they have nothing to write about. And the paparazzi,
Exactly.
without them, he has nothing to photograph. Like all that kind of stuff I thought was really like powerful and very, again, relevant to today. And then the other thing I wrote down is all these men keep trying to narrate a story that isn't theirs to tell. Like you have the male, screenwriter, and you have the tabloids who are run by men, and they're all trying to tell the story of the Spice Girls, and it's not their story, and it's just, I don't know, that really just like hit me this time watching it. I was like, damn, leave those girls alone.
Well, and that's just it. You know, you kind of you realize now how long ago this movie was made, and it's still the same old story, right? I mean, yes, I feel like certain women have been able to kind of take control of their musical careers, but you can't help but wonder whether or not there is, uh, some jerk in a suit that's kind of telling her or telling these
Closing
women, what
doors.
they can and can't do, right?
Well, there's also
Yeah.
like this thing about the Spice Girls where it's like there's safety in numbers. You have
Hmm.
5 women who have been able to agree to like do this together and show, equal respect to each other, and then also like give each other, advice and hold each other up. So there's no way that
Absolutely.
somebody can like infiltrate that and kind of
It's
poison,
much harder to be walked all over when you've got,
right?
four other women that are on your side because you're all on the same page, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
on that note, that's a very brilliant point because when the Spice Girls were filming this movie, they were actually under extreme stress because their management was keeping them separated. So they were in the south of France filming parts of this movie, and
Mm.
they were staying in this like villa, and they all had separate suites. And there was this like culture, according to Ginger Spice, she wrote in her first autobiography, and yes, I own both. Um, she wrote that they were all in their separate suites, and there was this like mentality that you couldn't talk to each other. Like everybody just had to report to Simon Fuller, who was the manager, and so it was kind of like a narcissistic triangulation thing where the girls actually weren't talking to each other and they were getting pitted against each other. And like certain girls were getting perks. Like Posh Spice was dating David Beckham. So she got more perks than the other girls because she was bringing more media attention to the band as a whole.
Okay.
And so Ginger writes in her book about how, they, after Spice World wrapped, they ended up dropping their management because she started talking to the girls and brought them all together, and they basically ran away and they had to start from scratch. So they had this whole world tour booked and the promo for Spice World, and they did all of that on their own. Some people came with them from the previous
Mhm.
management, but other people didn't.
Mhm.
And they had to hire new people and do all of that on their own and then do this tour. And all of that was obviously a lot of pressure on them. And Ginger Spice eventually left. But she actually talks about in her book how, she felt like, first of all, that culture of, keeping us separated because when we're together, we're unstoppable. And that's how they became the Spice Girls, is because the
Yep.
power of five is what, made people look up and be like, whoa, what's going on here? But then also she felt like they were being pushed into cartoon versions of themselves because of that product, right? The brand of the Spice Girls versus like, but when they started, they were young and they had these different personalities, and that's how the marketing began. But then, by the time this movie is out, Ginger Spice, as an example, is 26, right? Like she's different from how she was three
For
years
sure.
ago. And so she doesn't want to be Ginger Spice with her boobs out and, wearing all the makeup and all this kind of stuff. And so you see that in her solo career where she kind of peels those layers back. Whether that's authentic or not is a conversation for another day as well. But she does talk about that, where it's like you become the brand versus yourself as a person. But then with the Spice Girls, it's really weird because the reason why people gravitated to them so much is because it felt like they were these authentic girls, right? Like 5 different personalities. We can all pick one that we like or that we feel connected to. And to then
Exactly.
make that into a product is like, it almost like is brain breaking in a way. Yeah, and then the other thing I wanted to talk about was that scene of the judge sentencing the girls for not being relevant anymore. I thought was really, really clever and funny and also extremely relevant today. Um, and so I guess like for people that don't know the plot, the girls get all this, they're very pressured by all the deadlines and not being able to take a break. And their friend is pregnant and about to give birth, and they want to be able to be there for her, but they can't. And they have this concert. And so it all culminates in a big fight and they all separate. And then, of course, they start thinking about how they got there. And so there's like a flashback scene where they're young and they're just putting together the song Wannabe with their friend who's supporting them. And they all kind of come back together and talk about that. And then they talk about whether they've changed since they become famous or if it's just that they worry about different things. And they ask the question, like, will this all be over soon? And I thought that was really, really interesting, while also being a really funny scene.
It's funny because you never often see, I mean, not now at least, but you don't often see musicians be as self-aware as these women were. It's almost as if now, and I'm not going to name any names, but if you look at some of the biggest artists now, they almost live in a bubble or like a vacuum, where
Like
they're
separate
really
from us.
unaware.
Yeah, separate from our reality.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I mean, they don't even have to be like, your billionaire level artists. Like even the ones that are still largely successful, just maybe not financially, they still have like that. And I don't know if it's on purpose. I don't know if it's their handlers that purposely make them live in this bubble so that, excuse me, they're able to perform at a certain level without any distractions or what have you, or what this is, or whether it's
I mean, we could get
of
into a
that artist's own design.
like we could get into a large philosophical debate about, how
I can pinpoint it.
I mean,
it's a cultural thing.
Yeah, it's a cultural thing. But I mean, what I was going to say is that, like, if you watch like episodes of Black Mirror and you get like this idea of the dark world that we kind of, the dark timeline that we live in.
There's that Mel B energy.
And what I was going to say is like, it's almost like, you're destined to get into, like you're destined to fail, almost like it's almost like you're or not, or succeed. Either way, there's something written for you. And some people believe that it's written like to make things better for you. Some people believe it's made to be worse for you. And I don't think it really works that way entirely. I think that at the end of the day, it's like, the Spice Girls were just a phenomenon that had to happen when they happened and cannot happen again. And I think the reason for that, and it's going back to this Black Mirror idea I was getting at. There was this, like one of the first episodes where, it's just like everybody's working really hard day to day doing their job, and they would like to be that reality star that's on TV that's making all the fortune. And then you work towards that goal, and then you get there, and then you're a part of a new bubble, like you were saying, Eric. So I think that's where we're at now, society wise, with pop music and pop culture. Is it used to be a little bit more punk and a little more liberating, and now it's become more like grandstanding, and it's more about like, I'm special. Yeah, I'm special. I'm separate from you. You want to achieve this sort of special reality that I have, like that you don't have.
I think that's fair. And I think that in the context of like female artists in particular, the movie also touches on, the backlash of the press when they're sick of you, right? Like everyone wants women, well, any artist, but particularly women, to, be all the things, to be the Beyonce, right? And achieve. But there's nothing the public loves more than the downfall of a successful woman, right?
Absolutely. Britney Spears is a fantastic example of that.
Yes, 100%. Yeah, I think, and very interesting because she was also coming up during this time, right? And what you were saying before, Mo, about safety in numbers, absolutely. She's on her own, right? As opposed to these girls who could band back together and lean on each other to remove themselves from a toxic management situation.
Yeah, and even like going beyond just like, pop culture, and Britney Spears is another example, but like you can see that also in like just in general in media. People love to see a woman fall. For sure. Like, for example, that woman that had to get sued apparently because she had promised this wonder drug, or this wonder, so I forget her name now, but like, she was promising the world, and then it turned out that she couldn't actually keep those promises because the
whatever the woman from Theranos,
whatever the experiment, so whatever it was, and it failed horribly. But it's just that there was this promise made, and that's what everybody was so upset about, is like this promise made that you could extend our life eternally, almost like.
And if the promise is made by a man, nobody cares about it, right? Like
Exactly.
L. Ron Hubbard has been making that promise for how long, and David Miscavige, and nobody cares that it's not true,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But I know
Scientologists can
that's like
make
a
that
very
promise all day, but a real person, a doctor who is trying to find solutions, who is hopeful. And I have to give this woman a little bit of credit. She was hopeful that she was going to find something, but because that didn't turn out, everybody turned on her, and it became like this big fiasco. And again, it's nothing compared to like the fiasco of we barely talk about the guy who increased the prices on AIDS. I mean, he's in jail
yeah.
now, but like it's never going to be as big as that, right? If that person was a woman who had bought the AIDS drug and increased it would have been a whole bigger
I think
deal,
what you're
right?
getting at too is like this idea that you have to be ambitious and you have to be successful, but like not too successful. You don't want to take the shine away from somebody else. Like it's just, and as a woman, having grown up with those mentalities, yeah.
And then there's the double standard.
Yes,
everything.
yes.
And then there's the double standard, of course. Like there's always that. And then there's this idea that we also have to expect more from women because they haven't done those things before. And it's absurd, because it's like we don't expect those things from men, but we need to expect them from somebody who's trying to be better than men. That doesn't make sense to me. I don't know.
Yeah, and I think the Spice Girls in particular did that well.
Yeah.
Where I feel like they didn't go overboard. It wasn't about necessarily like we hate men or anything like that. It was just like we want to be the center of the story. We want to be the driving force.
They were basically women's lives matters before Black Lives Matters. You know what I mean? Like that's basically what it was. It was like, we just want to matter. Like, we're a part of the equation. We're the girl power was about being like, hey, yes, we want to empower women to be stronger for themselves, but also so that everybody can meet them at the same standard, right? Like all women are equal, as much as equal to every other man, so.
And I think like on that note, Mel B was really sort of ahead of her time in the pop sphere in particular, because of her visibility, right? Like she was wearing her natural hair. She was wearing Bantu knots in the movie, which I was like, whoa, that's really cool. Like, I just don't know that would have been that common at the time for a Black artist necessarily wear their hair naturally in the pop world. And I just thought that was like really amazing. And it reminded me of something else in Ginger Spice's autobiography, where she talks about how Mel B was like her first close Black friend. And Mel B would tell her, like, when I walk into a room, there are a lot of things that I have to think about that you don't have to think about. And Mel B was also very vocal about the fact that she's mixed race. Her mom is white and her dad is Black. And those kinds of discussions just like weren't really happening so much in that arena. So it's just like, again, looking back at the fearlessness of these women, that that they were willing to kind of put themselves out there in a way that maybe others wouldn't have. I don't know. It was just, that also was really like striking to me while watching the movie, and that was then marketed to America and people loved it. And yeah, I don't know, it was just really cool.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I don't know, there's just also like a lot. I liked also that all these women also had a lot of lightheartedness about the whole thing as well. Like I can be very dramatic when it comes to talking about political stuff, because I feel like it needs that sort of drama. But these women, it's not that they were not aware of what was happening in the world at the time or any other time, but they definitely did it. They definitely are aware, and you can tell they're conscious of it, and they're conscious of how they're perceived, but they just kind of live in the now. And I really, like, I just admire that, like to be able to live.
It's very British, right? Like they have a sense of humor about themselves in the situation they're in. Because like the other thing that we had talked about when we were watching the movie, Eric, was that Princess Diana died the year that this movie came out.
Right.
And
not just Princess Diana, but Gianni Versace too. In fact, I was hoping someone would mention this because they actually had to rewrite a couple of the scenes in the movie because there were references to both.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
And
Yeah. Get into
and they
it.
were alive. They were alive when they filmed the movie, but by the time the movie was going
Yeah.
to be released, they had both passed. So they
Yeah.
had to make some changes to the movie as a result of that.
Because there's the scene where they're driving the bus past the Buckingham Palace, right?
Buckingham Palace. That's right.
Yeah. So, and the Spice Girls were, they met Prince Charles, and Prince William was a really big fan of them, and so was Prince Harry. So, yeah, it's just, but also the other interesting thing about, well, I guess very sad and tragic thing about that is how the circumstances behind Princess Diana's death, and the fact that the Spice Girls were also sort of in this world in Britain where it was dangerous for them to travel, and the paparazzi
Absolutely.
were, exploding. Like, they were absolutely in the tabloids as well in that way, in a different way, but still, like, there was a definite fear for them, and they had to have increased security and all this type of thing. And just kind of like reconciling what was happening in the world with this movie, right? Like, it's like situated in a point in time, but then again, also still very relevant to things that we're seeing and going through today. Like, it's just a really timeless movie and also extremely nostalgic.
And also extremely funny, and I think, sorry, go ahead, Eric. Yeah.
No, I was going to say the thing about how it's timeless is it really reinforces certain themes that, regardless of the time period, I think people can get behind, and that's, being authentic, having strong friendships. And I think this movie absolutely does that, because even though the girls they're very different, and they they like that about that. They like how different each other is. And I think that's what the appeal is as well, is that you've got this group of women that are so totally unlike one another, and yet they are the best of friends, and they're moving ahead in the world. And I think that's something that we kind of all aspire to have a diverse group of friends and to lift each other up and really move forward together. Right.
And you're right, like that scene where they're doing the photo shoot and they all dress up as each other, right? It really shows we like each other. We're all very, very different. There are things that we wouldn't wear ourselves, but we like each other, and we're gonna do this thing to be goofy. And like, yeah, I thought that was really cute.
And I think that's a good segue to like how funny this movie all really was. I mean, putting aside all the darkness and the drama that you could kind of pull out of the story, this just the time that this movie was around, but it was also like it's almost like a comedy that was needed, and also like pitting a lot of stuff against the tabloids, but also not putting too much pressure on that either, because it's saying like, no, the tabloids at the end of the day are just as silly as everything else that's happening, right? So it's like,
absolutely,
you want to make them the villain in the storyline, but it's not. It's like the villain is really everybody else, taking everything for granted,
Exactly. And I like that you started off with the tabloids, because the character they had as the photographer, the tabloid photographer, was just so exaggerated, but hilariously so.
Right.
When they have him crawling out of the toilet, I died laughing.
And the photos that he had of the newspaper owner, my God, what is the word for that? This is you in the loo. This is you in the lift picking your nose. Oh God, so funny. So funny.
So many little like just humorous tidbits, and like I love the newspaper owner guy. I really found like his whole bit was really funny. The guy who worked with him, I'm pretty sure that was a guy from Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels. I can't remember that actor's name, but I've seen him in a lot of other films as well. But again, it's just bringing all these British actors together, which is hilarious. But
well, everybody wanted to be in this movie, right? Like, everybody knew somebody that was a huge fan. I mean, Stephen Fry was in this movie, and he admitted that he was simply in it because his two nephews were huge fans, and he was able to get
Yeah,
autographed pictures, and that was like basically his goal, you know? Like
yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
everyone
and
wanted to be a part of this movie.
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
Jennifer Saunders is the fashion lady
Yeah.
that is with Victoria at the party and telling her that she has manta ray sunglasses. Like I just again, like I had no idea who that was at when I was watching it as a child, but then watching it now, I'm like, she's iconic. Like she is
Yeah.
iconic
Exactly.
in British comedy, and she's in this movie that has like a 2.9 on IMDb. You know, like
Yeah, and then keeping with like the humor, like I just really like I really enjoyed Victoria in this film this time around.
mhm.
When I was younger, I didn't really understand Victoria as much, but I think now as an adult, I find her much funnier. And especially like the scene where they're supposed to be older, much older, and later on in
Oh
their
my
years, and
god,
they all
yes.
have children. And that scene where Victoria is like an older woman, but she's like, well, she agrees with everybody, but
Thank
that's
God
why,
for boarding
thank
school.
God for boarding school, right?
Boarding
Like
school.
I only
that's
see
where
mine
she's,
once a month.
and I mean that ties back to being like Eric. I mean, Eric would probably do the same if he had children. He'd just send them right to boarding school, like
I'll I'll take them when they're in their teens, you know?
Yeah. But it's
Yeah.
true. Like Victoria's sense of humor is very dry, and I think it's a lot like we can connect to it a lot more as adults now that we understand more about comedy. Whereas,
Absolutely.
Jerry and Mel B were more goofy and silly. So watching it as a kid, I found them more entertaining. And then you have Emma and Mel C, who I feel like play off the more innocence. They're more
Mhm.
like observing what's around
Sure.
them, and they're not necessarily delivering comedy the way the others are, but still very funny. Like they all brought something
And
really special.
yeah, and they all are a little bit. They all have a little bit of sense of humor as well, right? But I think it was
Mm-hmm.
something that reminds me of like a podcast I was listening to with just like the Beastie Boys very recently, and even they, you would say that most people who listen to the Beastie Boys took their career very seriously as rappers and artists or whatever. But in retrospect, if you look at the Beastie Boys in general, you always felt a sort of sense of humor, like that they always had like a kind of, there's something comical about their music, there's something a little bit like they're trying to push that barrier where it's like,
It's tongue in cheek.
yeah, tongue in cheek, it's
Yeah.
funny, but it's also about the music. And I feel the same way with the Spice Girls. It's like they always, like, they love their music, they love the songs that they make, they love performing them, but they also have a little bit of like fun with it because they know it's like, it's cheesy.
We're
it's
not the
it's
best, but
yeah.
we're having fun. Yeah. And
Yeah,
I
so
think
there's
on that note, it's interesting that when they were filming this as well, they had a really hard time with scripted dialogue. That was like
Mhm.
a real problem for them because obviously a script came to them and they were supposed to deliver certain lines. And sometimes they would just come off really stiff. And so I think what I read in, again, Jerry's autobiography, my chief source was that Mel B kind of said, can you just let us riff off each other? Like we do much better when there isn't a script or when the cameras aren't, like we don't realize the cameras are on. So a lot of like what we're seeing when we're watching the movie is them just sort of letting loose. And I
Natural.
feel like that
Yeah.
also comes across like they're having fun and we're having fun with them because they don't
Mhm.
feel rehearsed. They don't feel like they're
Because
putting
it
on
just
something.
feels like the Spice Girls, right? It doesn't feel
Yeah.
like the Spice Girls reading a script or the Spice Girls
It doesn't
being
feel like capital A
told
acting. Like I think,
what to say, right? Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah, they're
There's
not
a lot
trying
more
to go
in the
overboard,
Spice Girls in their natural state,
but
right?
their natural
Mhm.
state is kind of already funny. Yeah, as it is.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And honestly, that's true. Like you didn't have to do much with the Spice Girls to make them funny, but like the whole British humor thing that was brought to this film, I love to explore that because it
Well,
it
you
made
said that
me,
it felt like Monty Python, right?
yeah, right, like it made me feel like
Mhm.
watching the Flying Circus all over again, because it's just like a lot of like random funny moments, and they kind of, it's almost like you were watching Monty Python, and then they're like, okay, and now for something completely different, and then
Yes,
boom, it blows
yeah.
up, and then there's something else happens.
I felt that
So
way too.
yeah, so there's a lot of that, and especially like the scene where, like, you know, he's the tabloid leader guy. He's just really, you know, upset, and he gets so angry while he's, you know, talking about the Spice Girls, that it starts raining inside of the, you know, and Buddy's like, I wish you wouldn't get so upset. You know, like, and then it's just like raining inside the building, you know. Or later on he gets so happy with glee that it's like a light starts shining on his face.
Something happened to my face.
Yeah.
I think you're smiling.
I think you're smiling. Yeah, those kind of moments. And then of course they even bring, I didn't watch a lot of Hugh and Laurie, but you know, they brought
Hugh Laurie as the murder mystery.
Hugh Laurie and Hugh and Fry.
Stephen Fry, yeah.
Yeah, Stephen Fry. And like Stephen Fry as the judge was hilarious. He's also in a lot of those kind of like surrealist sort of comedy things, like, again, reminding you of like things like Blackadder and stuff like that. So going back to like the old kind of 60s 70s humor, which I feel like this movie was really set that way, because even though it was in the 90s, there was a lot of cars. Like, was England still back in time at the 90s?
I think your point is completely, you're on point, because the Spice Girls were very influenced by their parents,
right,
and what their parents were watching and listening to growing up. So I think like that influence really is there. And whether that was like an intentional choice in terms of the set, I don't really know, but definitely the humor, that makes perfect sense, because those would have been things that the girls were watching when they were kids, right?
Exactly.
Like the marching band leader guy that's supposed to teach him how to dance.
Yes.
Like that was just he's just insane. Like
absurd,
there's nothing logical about what he's doing or saying, right? It was
just to be bizarre for the sake of being bizarre. It was amazing.
Exactly.
But it also gave us an opportunity to see how people being different, like it's almost like, here's the humor, but also people being different, but being the same, you know. Like, it's like we could all dress, there's the stereotypes, you could stereotype somebody, but at the end of the day, you know, who are you to judge? Like, everybody's got you know, got their title for whatever reason or from whatever purpose. So yeah, it was.
I also, like, can we talk about Mark McKinney? Like, I thought he was so good as the
well, that also kind of ties to the whole Monty Python thing, because Mark McKinney was from Kids in the Hall, and to me, Kids in the Hall is very, like, again, it's Canadian humor, but it still has a little bit of that British absurd reality humor, which I really enjoy from Kids in the Hall. So yeah, Mark McKinney, just great. Like, you know, I could even imagine that he improvised a lot of his lines, because he's just such a good actor. Yeah, and it was just really, really well
when he was
done.
describing the first pitch of the movie, where the girls are sisters, and the middle sister, Melanie C, has to overcome her fear of skis fear of heights and snow, and just get her hands on a pair of skis. That was like, I'm crying. It was so good. It was so clever, so funny. And like, and also the end, like the whole sort of climax of the movie is him describing the final pitch, which is the movie that we're watching.
You're just watching? Yeah.
Yeah, and like, I thought that was so well done. And you see like Clifford and his like writing partner getting so excited as he's like describing, and then the camera's cutting to all these scenes that he's describing what the Spice Girls are actually doing, which is just so well done. And then you see like when he brings up the bomb and everyone gets so upset, like, they didn't do enough. Like, that was so good. It was so clever.
Yes, and it's just like the acting was clever, but it was just also, he just sucked you in. He was very
beautifully written.
Everybody seems perfect. And I mean, the one person we haven't touched on too is also like their manager, right? Like that Clifford. Clifford.
Richard E. Grant.
Richard E. Grant is just outstanding. Like, as a an actor, as a like, just for like the physical comedy, right? He was able to turn himself off, himself on very quickly, just like respond. It's just amazing.
Even like I was saying when we were watching, when they do the exterior shots of the bus and you hear Clifford giving a formal announcement over the loudspeaker, his delivery of those lines was so
Yes.
good. Like there's nothing even happening. You're just looking at a bus and hearing a man talking, but the way he's saying it is so funny. I'm like,
Yeah.
that is a brilliant comedian. Like
Yeah.
it was just, yeah, very, very good.
Yep. I very much enjoyed the humor in this movie, and
And
like the
Meatloaf,
acting.
oh, Meatloaf.
Well, that's
For me,
another.
the delivery
Sorry,
of
go
his
ahead.
line of, but he won't do that. You know, when he's
Yeah.
asked to clear the clog in the girls'
And
toilet on the bus was
Yeah,
amazing.
I'll do a lot
so
Absolutely
of
good.
amazing.
things, but I won't do
But he won't
that.
do that.
And
Like died
objectively
laughing when he
funny,
did
right?
that.
Like you don't have to know who
Agreed.
Meatloaf is to find that funny.
Yeah,
Because it's a
No,
toilet
exactly.
joke, right? Like it's gonna be funny
Right?
either way, but the way he says it is funny, and then when you know the song, it's funny. Oh God,
well, Iris was
it was
saying
really
too that
good.
when she was younger, like she didn't even know who Meatloaf was and still thought that
No,
line was hilarious, right? So it's like
yeah,
you didn't really need to know who Meatloaf was, but it's just funny enough of a line, just on its own. But even knowing who Meatloaf is and watching and having that,
yeah.
that's
Mhm.
the humor. Yeah, yeah.
And I also wanted to talk about the other, because again, there's so much going on while this movie's like wrapping up. When Nicola is about to birth, the girls like have their rebellion and they decide, you know what, we're gonna go have fun and we're gonna take our very pregnant friend to the club, which I thought was hysterical. She is literally about to pop, and they bring her to this drag club and they leave her and they go dance in the middle of the club to their own song while their pregnant friend is by herself up
Yeah,
on the
that was weird.
balcony. I was like, what is happening right now? But again, so absurd, right? Like so funny. And then her water breaks and it is time to go. And that scene of them in the bus where they're trying to sort of prepare Nicola for having her baby, I thought was one of the funniest things I've ever seen. Like they're wearing dishwashing gloves and trying to figure out what they're gonna do. Victoria's having a panic attack. Like it was so good. And like again, these aren't improv actors. These are just the Spice Girls, right? And they just were able to
Exactly.
kind of deliver this scene where they're all bringing something different, but they're riffing off each other, and it was just really funny. There's like the moment where Jerry says the first thing you do is put your legs together, and Mel B is like, "Oh, well, she should have done that 9 months ago." I'm like, that felt so
Oh,
natural. Oh God, it was so funny.
What a burn.
So
That's like a
funny.
burn of the week.
Yeah.
Should have kept your legs together earlier, you know what I'm saying? All right.
And then Victoria, like, oh, the baby's not going to get very far. She still has her tights on. Like, oh God, so good. So clever. And then when they get to the hospital and Victoria, Mel C, and Jerry have to go talk to the kid that's in a coma.
Why don't you try taking your top off?
There's a much point. He's got his eyes shut. That was also really brilliantly done. And again, it was self-referential, right? Like Jerry was in the papers because they found her topless modeling photos and there was this big backlash about it because the Spice Girls were a family-friendly band. And then, of course, they were at the Brit Awards and Jerry was wearing the Jessica Rabbit dress and raised her arms and her boobs fell out, right? So all of that had happened to her recently, right? Like she had been going through it in terms of how the public was perceiving her. But then to have the wherewithal to like make a joke about it was really cute and clever. Like, yeah, I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, I really, really like enjoyed a lot of the stuff in this film. I definitely one of our favorite ones that we've gotten through so far, and that's why I was glad to have Iris here to like talk about it as well. Because yeah, it was just one of those favorites from our childhood, from the '90s, especially. That really spoke to a lot of people, made a huge splash. Now, I personally watched it when I was younger with my sister, and that's how I got familiar with the Spice Girls. Because I mean, although I'm sure it was acceptable at the time to listen to Spice Girls as a boy on your own, we weren't that advanced culturally yet for that to
No.
be a thing. So for me, it was through my sister that I got familiar with them. But then, yeah, no, that movie stands the test of time. There's still lines from it that I still remember.
There's lines in
day.
it that I still quote to this day.
Well, even even silly things, because just the way they spoke like stuck out. Like they have a certain British accent that really sticks out, and just like when she's yelling for Emma, that scene, I always remember that because just Emma, like the way she says it makes me laugh.
It's the northern accent, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, they just have a lot of there's just a lot going on there that's just really interesting and very lovely and yeah, relatable. And there's somebody, the nice thing is there's 5 of them. So you're bound to find yourself somewhere in the spectrum of Spice Girls. Like you're bound to fall somewhere in between or find that one Spice Girl that you really like out of the Spice Girls. And so, and I just remember them being so big, and especially in the Commonwealth, that like when they went to India, it was like the biggest concert in history. Like it was just like, you know what I mean? Like they were so enormous, just such a huge.
They were huge. Like, you're just insane,
and so young. We were saying like they're in their early 20s, and to be that popular in your early 20s, and at a time where we
over the course of 2 years,
like the media we have now, like it's just incredible, very incredible story. So. Yeah, I really love this movie. I really loved watching it with my partner again as an adult. I would definitely suggest something that you could sit down and watch with your kids even now, and they will enjoy it. They won't know who the Spice Girls are, but they're gonna love them. And
well, it's interesting you say they won't know who the Spice Girls are because Billie Eilish up until 2017. Thought that the Spice Girls were like a fake band, kind of like how Spinal Tap is, and how they were just invented. Yes, she thought movie? They were a band that they were invented for the movie the way Spinal Tap was invented.
Spinal Tap was invented. That's amazing.
I didn't know that. That's crazy.
Yeah.
So this movie,
a little bit of research for this.
Yes,
so
obviously
funny.
She doesn't think that now.
No,
like if she thought it, then I'm sure there's other people who might think that.
Yeah. So maybe, that's incredible to think, though.
Sure.
Like that the Spice Girls were so big they made themselves, but that a movie could later on stand around on its own as on
its own, exactly.
Because like you didn't even have to know who the actual Spice Girls were because there's a film about this like fake story of Spice Girls.
Imagine thinking, what? These aren't real. That's got to be a fake band. There's no way this is the real group.
Yeah.
That's insane.
Yeah. No, that's
that makes
pretty
me
cool.
feel old.
But yeah, no, thank you so much for joining us, Iris, on this journey, and I'm sure Eric also appreciated it, and
yes,
it was a good time, and hopefully we'll be able to have you again for another one, another special. So thanks.
Something else that falls within my niche set of interest.
Of course. Yeah, and thanks everybody for listening, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your week. Take care.
Bye.
All right.
Give me that in the city chair. Jump around in my whip, itty bitty, looking pretty chill. Put my shades on, you ain't even seen it yet. Man, I'm so fresh, and you know I'm always spelling cheer. Give me what you want, what you got, cause I never get enough. You ask me how I want it, and you say you want a chance on me. Chances are you don't know how to do this shit respectfully. I say it like you're rough, cause I need a man protecting me. I ain't say this shit for later. I said, baby, come and get it. Feels taking over if you let him. I'ma take the paper, I'ma roll it up, and later he might do what he wanted, cause I let him. Give me something that I'm never gonna forget, because baby, I'm the only one you gotta impress. I won't take any more, and I won't take any less. I'm the queen in this, you know I got the finesse. Give me that, give me that, give me that. Give me that feeling. Bring it back, bring it back, bring it back.
I'm rolling up some Trinidad, feeling like the bestest. Always got the best shits. Come around, baby, yeah, you knowin' who the best is, and that's just for the record, so y'all don't get it twisted. I ain't talking cheese, even though I'm buzzing. Listen, you don't wanna miss it when you get the feeling. It'll make you feel explicit like a new addiction, baby. It'll take a hold. I know you're feeling cold, cause I've been feeling cool. You give me all these feelings that I used to have in school. These butterflies got me feeling light, like I'm floating through the air, hanging out like a satellite. Yeah, it's really got me feeling right. All around me, yeah, looking like a ceiling light. Hanging out where the heather glows. See me from the center of the earth with no telescope.
Give me that